guys, what's going on? I'm Aaron World, and have you ever been watching a movie and noticed heavy distortions in the corners of the frame? Well, that's called astigmatism. Astigmatism is a natural characteristic of the lens, usually from some complexity within the engineering of the said lens, mostly found in older lenses, so vintage lenses, and it's definitely prominent in anamorphic lenses. So today, I'm going to show you how you can get this effect in DaVinci Resolve Studio while still using normal, modern, autofocusing lenses that are usually really good, but are very sharp, very clinical, don't have a lot of those characteristics built into them anymore. So let's dive into DaVinci Resolve and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, first things first. You want to open DaVinci Resolve Studio, import your footage, give it a color grade. For this video, I've just used Cine Print 16, really good film emulation. If you're curious, that's what I'm using for this video. Once that's done, chuck in a new node, usually in the middle or however your node layout works. I don't put it at the end, I usually chuck it in the middle. To do that, hit Alt S. I think it's like Option S or something on Mac computers. I don't know, don't quote me, I don't use a Mac. Now you want to label your first node that you just made, call it masking. Now you want to head down to your window tab in DaVinci Resolve, crack that open up a circle. You can keep it circular if you want, but I like to keep it a little bit oval shaped. Kind of looks a little bit more natural in my opinion. And you spread that out, soften it a little bit. It's okay if it goes out of the frame. Okay, now that that's done, you want to hit Alt S again. So you've created a new node. And you want to label this node effect, or whatever you feel comfortable with naming it. When that's done, you want to go over to the effects panel and search tilt, shift, blur. When you found that, you drag that onto your effects node, and when it's there, you want to go to the masking node, and from the alpha output, you want to drag that into your second RGB input on the effects node. Once that's done, go to map source and hit second RGB input. Now it's going to not look very good, but don't worry, we'll fix it up. First things first, go to focus sweep, drag all that down all the way to -1. And you can see it's kind of gradually fading in, which is what we want. I've tried using Gaussian blur and all that stuff. It kind of just looks like an overlay. This kind of looks a little bit more convincing. Once that's done, you can adjust your blur strength. I keep it around 2 to 2.5 usually is where it ends up, but you can crank it up if you want. Then you go to lens iris, and this is where the magic happens of the effect. Iris shape, you can change it from whatever you want. I usually like hexagon. I think it looks a little bit more natural, but the one slider that I crank is the anamorphism slider. That makes it look a little bit more anamorphic, and I love anamorphic lenses. But filming on them, when you're a low budget filmmaker and you're usually filming yourself, it gets very difficult really quickly to try and get everything in focus. And especially if you're moving around the scene a lot, very difficult to try and focus on yourself. So I crank that up quite a bit, and you can kind of see in the edges of the frame, it's starting to look a little better. You can also go to the highlights and adjust the highlights to make it blend in a little bit more. The highlights tab will only be affecting more or less whatever it is that you've done to the masking. So I usually bring the far blur down a little bit. Adjust the near blur, it doesn't really do too much. You can also adjust focusing range, which is making the circle smaller or bigger, and you can see that here. And you can still adjust the focus sweep as well, but as you can see, it starts to kind of like go in on itself. So now that that's done, I want to adjust the far blur, make it a little bit more blurry. Maybe make it like that. And there we go. So you can see fairly small change until deselect these nodes, and you can see very clean image, enable them again, and you've got this nice effect going on. I find if you have a dirtier frame, like you've got subjects or objects or whatever in front of the lens and behind the subject that you're trying to focus on, I find that this is where this effect really starts to shine. I just whipped up another scene from my recent trip to Japan, and you can see around the edges here that it's, quite distorted, really nice. So it's a bit of back and forth. You can go back to the masking window, adjust the softness, and it kind of eases it into the scenes. I'm pretty happy with that, and I think that looks quite nice. So this is a very low budget option if you don't want to, say, film with an anamorphic lens, but you still want a little bit of anamorphic character. If you want to dirty up your image a little bit, add a little bit of a vintage flair, this is a really low budget way to go, and I'm all about low budget filmmaking. I think it's awesome. Shitty rigs have never failed me once. However, it's not gonna be exactly like the real thing. I don't think you can truly replicate the effects that you can get from an anamorphic lens or from a vintage lens. That's like, obviously it's hard coded into the lens and that's a characteristic, but if you're kind of working on a budget, and if you're like me who films themselves quite a bit, an autofocus lens is way easier to do that with. And so, if I wanted to add that flair, this is what I'd do. I'd come back and put this in the computer, enter in this kind of effect if that's what I want for the scene. And I think it does a really good job. Yeah, I'd love to hear in the comments section how you guys would use it, or if you guys have used it before. Let me know if there's anything I missed out that could make it look a little bit more compelling. I'd love to hear from you guys. My socials are in the description box below. Go outside, film some stuff. Would love to see what you guys make with it. Cheers.